Well, hey everybody. Welcome back to the May 30th, 2024 edition of Dr. Pitt's Tips Live. I am licensed marriage and family therapist and life coach, Dr. Lauren Pitts Bounds. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Hopefully, you all had a great Memorial Day and ate some really good food and loved on family members and friends and stayed safe and all of that good stuff. And here we are again, about to share some powerful information with you. So, for those of you that have never tuned in, I'm going to say what I always say. The reason why I'm doing this is because there is a stigma associated with behavioral mental health, relational health, and folk don't want folk all up in their business and the whole nine yards and blah, blah, blah. And my social media manager said, well, Dr. Pitts, if they won't come, bring it to them. So here I am every Thursday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., sort of ish. And I just want to share some information with you. I want to load up your toolbox and hopefully provoke your thoughts in some really substantive ways that are going to be instrumental in helping you to be a stronger, healthier, and better you. So, before I do all that, I have to put this disclaimer out here that the information that I'm sharing with you during my lives, on my webpage, on my podcasts, my reels, my recordings, and wherever you see Dr. Pitts, it is just that. It is information. I am a licensed therapist. I am a life coach, but I am not your therapist and I am not your life coach. I'm here sharing information with you, just wanting to sort of drop some pearls of wisdom, if you will, that can help you to navigate life in a healthier way. So, what I want you to do is I want you to listen. I want you to take notes if you so choose to. And if anything that I share with you, if you feel like it is applicable to your life and maybe you could benefit from it, I want you to make sure that you are talking to your own behavioral mental health relationship practitioner to make sure that the information that I am sharing is applicable to you appropriately. Here's the thing: therapy, life coaching, this approach that I share with you regarding wellness, it's not a cookie cutter approach. There is a unique approach that has to be taken with each person. And yes, we have theories and models and concepts that we utilize when working with our clients, but it doesn't mean that a particular theory, concept, or approach is going to work for you based on your unique situation. So please, please, please be responsible in how you are taking in this information. Be responsible in your decision as to whether or not you're going to apply it to your life. And just give yourself permission to obtain the relevant professional and specialist advice before taking, refraining from, or otherwise engaging in any action based on the information that I'm providing for you. If you are having a medical or mental health condition, please seek immediate attention. You can do that by calling 911, or if it's specifically mental health, you can call 988. But please behave responsibly and make sure that you are doing what you need to do to properly protect yourself. I commit to doing research and trying to stay on top of relevant information that is current. But I am a human therapist, I am a human life coach, and that being said, I might not get it right all the time. So I encourage you, fact check. I am totally okay with you doing that. That says wisdom, that says maturity, that says responsibility. So please do that. So, enough of the formalities. I want to talk to you tonight about love. And I titled tonight's session, Do You Love Me? Because as you can imagine, as a couple, marriage, and family therapist, I hear a lot of chatter from both individuals and the couples that I work with about the issues that are going on in these intimate relationships. And there are so many intimate relationship conflicts that just, it's unbelievable sometimes, some of the things that I hear. And I said, you know what? I'm going to talk about this on a live. I'm going to give folks some tools in their toolbox that hopefully will give them the courage to make better choices when it comes to your relationships, to make better choices when it comes to who you're exposing your heart to make better choices when it comes to who you're committing to. So I've got some questions I want to ask you, and feel free to do like you normally do. You can chat with me because I'm live on here on Facebook and on Instagram. You can chat with me in the window, and I'll try and address the questions that you may present during the live. So my thought provoking questions for you to start out this discussion are: what are the healthy ways to express love? How do you show your love and affection? How do you demonstrate love? How do you give love and affection to someone? One of the things that I've, goodness gracious, I've been saying for years now is I want someone to love me enough to tell me the truth in what I call a non samurai sword sort of way. In other words, I don't want you to tell me the truth with the intent of slicing all of my major arteries emotionally. I want you to tell me the truth in love. Understanding that the truth does hurt sometimes, but just because the truth hurts doesn't mean that you have to say it in a hurtful way. There is a way to demonstrate difficult information with compassion and empathy and sensitivity so that your delivery is not further wounding someone. So I wanted to put that on your radar. But I want you to consider this. A healthy way of demonstrating love and affection is by sharing, supporting, and accepting the other person as an individual. This means respecting their thoughts, feelings, boundaries, and being there for them in a positive and non judgmental way. So I wanted to share something with you, personal, if I may, but I'm doing this not to be grandiose or braggadocious or anything like that, but to lead in to this conversation tonight in a very substantive and authentic way. So, May the 22nd was my third wedding anniversary, and it was also my husband's 55th birthday. And I'm I'm not someone that is hard to put a smile on my face. It does not take a lot to put a smile on my face. I'm not a materialistic person. Do I like gifts? I do. But what I really love is the heart, is people that love me and care about me, expressing their love for me in truly deep and meaningful ways that may or may not involve an actual gift. But I wanted to share with you two of the cards that my husband got me because I just thought that they were so fitting for this topic tonight. The first one says, "For the woman I love, love forgets mistakes, holds on to the good, looks into the heart of who you are. Love helps you to laugh, to see the lighter side, the brighter side, the glass half full. Love makes your whole life sing. You are the love of my life, and your love makes my whole world sing. Happy anniversary. Love you, baby. E-Bugs." That's one of my pet names for him. He's my E-Bugs. He's my E-Bugs, he's my chocolate kiss, and he's my spiritual boo. The second one says, "You're the one who knows my stories, gets my jokes, takes my side, ignores my quirks, finishes my sentences, soothes my worries. You're the one who makes all my days better and somehow makes me a better me. Happy anniversary. Love you, ebooks. And I wanted to share that because one of the constant themes that I see in this work that I do day in and day out is that people oftentimes go from being relationship allies to relationship enemies. In other words, they say out their mouth that they love each other, but their behaviors suggest that they hate each other. Their behaviors suggest that they're enemies. Their behaviors suggest that you're the reason for all of my pain. You're the reason why I'm not happy. You're the reason why I'm not experiencing joy and peace and fulfillment. I love you too. You're the reason why life is just all screwed up. And what I say to that, first and foremost, is each of us is responsible for our own emotional experiences. For those of you that have tuned into my podcast, you've heard me say on the podcast before that in actuality in life, our experiences are neutral. They take on the meaning that we give them. Hence why bottle half full, bottle half empty. Obstacle or opportunity. Each of us has the ability to interpret our situation and circumstance. And when it comes to how you are expressing and receiving love, you have to ask yourself, what is my interpretation of this exchange? Am I receiving this act of kindness as an expression of love? I remember I was working with a couple one time, and what appeared to be happening is there was this breakdown in communication regarding how each other was interpreting the expression of love. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Dr. Gary Chapman's The Five Love Languages, right? And people talk about love language, love language, love language. And it's fine, well, and good to talk about it. But if you're not going to employ what you learn about how your partner receives love, what did you take the assessment for? What did you read the book for? It's it's no good if you don't utilize it. I'm not going to go into details about it tonight, but I am going to do a session on about the conversation and the understanding around love languages and love styles and love stages, right? And understanding how that impacts how you give and receive love. But here's the thing. I think that it's important for you to ask yourself, what examples have you had in your life of what true, healthy, fulfilling, sustainable love looks like, feels like, is experienced like in a relationship? If you don't know what it looks like or feels like, how do you know if it's being expressed in a healthy way? I'm not suggesting for a moment that you don't know in its entirety what love is, but I'm sure each of you can think of at least one person that you know that talks about how much they love someone or how much someone loves them, but for you being on the outside looking in, it looks more like hate. It looks more like abuse, neglect, and maltreatment rather than love. And that's what I say to folks. Well, if that's love, what would it look like if he or she hated you? Because that doesn't look like love to me. That is not my clinical or my personal or professional example of what healthy, fulfilling, and sustainable love looks like. And I'm live on Instagram on my phone, so I can't even pull up 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. Um, and it's so important to understand all of the moving parts that are going into whether or not you are giving and receiving love in a healthy way. So I want to throw this phrase out there. No, it's not a phrase, it's only 2 words. But I want to ask you, in your opinion, what is unconditional love? One of the things that I often say to my couples is that I believe that part of the reason why the divorce rate or the breakup rate in this country is so high is because so many people have entered relationships with rose colored glasses on without an appropriate example of what true, healthy, sustainable love is. And they are totally, so it seems, oblivious to the fact that they are entering a committed relationship with a flawed human being. In other words, you enter into a relationship with someone, and in some cases, I'm only talking about what my observations have been personally and professionally, but in certain scenarios, you enter into a relationship with someone imposing expectations upon them to behave a certain way, to do certain things, to prove to you how much they love you and how much they want to be with you, but yet your own behavior is a contradiction to the demand that you're imposing upon them. And you absolutely, positively have to take a look at that. Double standards will erode the integrity, health, strength, and sustainability of your relationship every time. So when you look at double standards within the context of how you're giving and receiving love, are you asking something of someone that you yourself are incapable or unwilling to give? And that's the piece that I want to tie to unconditional love. It's it's asking yourself, am I demanding of my partner to love me freely and without condition, but I'm imposing all of these conditions upon them regarding how they give me love? It's, you know, if you really love me, you would do this, and this. Well, guess what? Things are not going to always be your way. And when we look at the significance of unconditional love on our relationships, it takes into consideration that it's a selfless act of loving someone and fully accepting them, technically without expecting anything in return. But if I were to put it in biblical context, it's better to give than to receive. But when we give, just by design of reciprocity, we receive. And when you look at that, I'm not going to go into a bunch of scientific detail, but when you look at the giving and receiving of love through the concept of the law of circulation, the law of circulation says that when you give, you receive, but you don't have to first receive in order to give. But when you do so, it completes the circle. The same concept applies when it comes to giving and receiving love. I don't have to wait for you to show me that you love me to demonstrate love to you. It's nice, but the point that I'm trying to make is, how different would your relationships be if each of you woke up tomorrow and said, you know what? I'm going to take responsibility and accountability for how I show love to those that I profess to love and care about. Whether it's your husband, your intimate partner, your children, your parents, your siblings, it doesn't matter. I'm going to take responsibility and accountability for how I show my love. If you did that, how much more fulfilling might your relationships be? How much more rewarding and strengthened and sustainable might your relationships be? There's a lot of debate in the clinical world around whether or not you can love someone properly without loving yourself. And it's a debate. I have an opinion on that. I'm not going to say that it's impossible to love someone else if you don't love yourself, but I think that it's difficult. And the reason why I think that it's difficult is because each of us sets the standard for how other people treat us. Well, how is that initial standard of treatment demonstrated? Right, by how we treat ourselves. So if I don't love myself, if I don't like myself, if I am self rejecting, if I'm navigating life with no self worth, low self esteem, and this persistent headspace of not feeling good enough or not feeling worthy, how is that going to impact how I receive love? You've heard me talk about relationship attachment styles, and in particular, the dismissive, avoidant, insecure attachment style and the fearful, avoidant, insecure attachment style put a great deal of emphasis on the fear associated with love because people are so guarded because they're afraid they're going to be hurt, right? So what ends up happening a lot of times is you'll see self-sabotage happen in those relationships. You have someone that's attempting to love you unconditionally, but because you don't love yourself, because you don't feel worthy, you reject that, right? You reject that person's love, and oftentimes that rejection comes in the form of bitterness, resentment, jealousy, insecurity, fill in the blank. Well, that gets old really quick. So now you have this discord in the relationship that can be directly connected to the fact that you don't like or love yourself. So because you don't like or love yourself, it has the possibility of negatively impacting your ability to receive the love that others have for you. So I really want you to sort of do that self exploration and sit with your findings. Give yourself permission to be honest with you. I cannot tell you how many times in doing this work all these years that, I've had individuals come in and they say to me, everybody that they've ever been in a relationship with has cheated on them. And you've heard me say on here and on my podcast before, okay, well, you're the common denominator in that relationship. So if everybody has cheated on you, that tells me that there's something going on with your selection process. And one of the things that I have to ask is, are you finding yourself in relationships with people that validate the low opinion that you have of yourself? And because you're with people that validate the low opinion that you have of yourself, they're not going to love you the way that you need, want, and deserve to be loved because you're not holding them to that standard. How are you going to hold somebody to a standard that, again, you yourself are not honoring? There comes a point in time where you have to commit if you want to be healthy, if you want to have healthy, loving, fulfilling, and sustainable relationships, where you have to commit to learning how to love you. And I truly believe that when you learn how to love yourself, you will be better able to receive the love that others have for you. So, what's what are what are some indications that somebody does not love you? Abuse, neglect, and maltreatment is not only a key indication to you that somebody doesn't love you, it's also a key indication to you that they don't love themselves. And here's what I mean by that. When you truly like yourself, when you truly love yourself, you're more inclined to hold yourself to a higher standard of conduct. And when you hold yourself to a higher standard of conduct, it embodies what healthy love looks like and feels like, if that makes sense. Like how can I say I love you and then I beat on you? Again, if this is love, what would it look like if you hated me? How can I say I love you and I'm constantly cheating on you? How can I say I love you and I'm constantly gaslighting you, embarrassing you, humiliating you, mocking you, making a fool of you? How can I say I love you when every opportunity I'm belittling, degrading, demeaning? If that's love, what would it look like if you hated me? I need you to ask yourself these questions. You've heard me say before, and it's actually a session I'm going to do in a couple of weeks on infidelity, but you've heard me say before that infidelity has a mutual culpability component to it. And I'm just for clarity's sake, I'm not saying, I would never say that the reason why somebody cheated is because of their partner, because the decision to cheat, i.e., bringing whether or not you really love me into question, is not because of something that the other person said or did. But things that the other person say or do can create reasons that the person that cheats justifies their cheating, even though it's ultimately their choice. So I know it's hard. I'm not going to go too deep into it because I'm going to cover it in another session on another night, but is it possible that the reason why you're being cheated on all the time is because you actually have someone that genuinely and sincerely loves you and cares about you, but you're self-sabotaging, you're constantly pushing them away? So because we're human and relationships are about having needs met, you end up pushing that person into the arms of someone else. Now, as I said a moment ago, it is their decision. They have to take ownership for that decision. And what I say to folks is leave. Before you cheat and deal with all of that crap, just leave. Because it's going to bring the love that you have for the person into question. It's going to. How can it not? How can you say that you love me and keep hurting me? So here's some signs of what unconditional love looks like. And this can get hairy, so I'm gonna tease it out because I don't want folks to put words into my mouth and jump to all types of crazy conclusions, because there's some underbelly to this that I want to make clear. When you're demonstrating unconditional love towards someone, you're accepting their faults without a desire to change them. Now, here's the caveat to that, right? The selection process. There is no perfect person. And because there's no perfect person, there's no perfect relationship. But two imperfect people can have a healthy relationship. And in that healthy relationship, you can be acceptant of the person's faults. And you don't need to change them, they need to change themselves. See the difference? You don't have to get over into that codependent behavior and you're determined that you're going to change them, you're going to change them, you're going to change them. When we're dealing with our own human fallacies and imperfections, the responsibility is on the individual to address their own flaws. And if people were willing to address their own flaws more frequently, it would lend itself to people being healthier, which can increase the amount of healthy love that is given and received. Unconditional love says that your needs are paramount and views as valid. In other words, I'm going to tie it to emotional intelligence, right? Because relationships are about having needs met, one of the things that I say to my couples pretty frequently is what would happen in your relationship if each of you woke up each day and committed to being the best version of yourself that you could be that day. You've heard me say it time and time and time and time again. My husband reaps the benefits of my decision to be a stronger, healthier, better version of myself every day. And I reap the benefit of him waking up each day committed to being a stronger, healthier, better version of himself each day. Somebody on Instagram said, folks are, if they are not changing, then what? That's a great question, which goes back to the selection process, right? People, and I get it. I get it. I made these mistakes too once upon a time. People get so caught up in the rose colored glasses image of their partner. They get so caught up in the woo woo woo. They get so caught up in the sex is great and the conversation is this and all of these things. And they make a conscious decision to ignore the person's flaws. You cannot change anybody. Each of us has the ability to be the change that we wish to see in others. Let me further expound. There's a term that you've probably heard me use before called a CNIP, a core negative interaction pattern. And the core negative interaction pattern is cyclical. And it just demonstrates what happens when you have negative behavior feeding off of negative behavior. And it creates sort of like this funnel that, dependent upon how severe it gets, it can be like an F5 tornado in your relationship. And you can't make the other person modify their behavior to change the trajectory of the CNIP. You have to modify your behavior. You've heard me reference it before. I said it is the oil changes or the tune-ups or the tire rotation in your behavior. In other words, it's the routine maintenance of your behavior that can be instrumental in changing the trajectory of that core negative interaction pattern. I have somebody on Instagram said, if one person saw what a healthy, fulfilled marriage looks like and the other didn't, and they stick to that and are stuck on the fact that providing and not cheating shows that I love you. And in that case, when you have those differences like that, I believe that that's a golden opportunity to maybe consider some couples therapy, right? To consider some marriage counseling. Because one of the things that I address with my couples is these unspoken rules and unconscious roles, among other things that come into play in the marriage that stem from how you were raised. We all bring into our relationships values and beliefs, ideologies, opinions, and so on and so forth based upon how we were raised. And here's the thing, some of it is so ingrained, it's so ingrained that we don't even realize that it's a thing until it becomes a thing. So there has to be willing. You'll hear me use the word template a lot when I'm talking about my couples. One of the things that I say to my couples is, you came in with your individual stuff and your partner came in with their individual stuff. Part of how you have a strong, healthy, sustainable relationship is you have to take the parts from your individual stuff that are beneficial to the integrity, health, strength, and sustainability of your relationship and create a unique template that is instrumental in governing your relationship. Everything that you came up with, everything that you learned is not going to necessarily be applicable in your relationship. My husband and I were having a conversation the other day, and I was saying that I was cut from a different cloth. And what I meant by that is there was a standard of behavior that I was held to growing up that was different than what he was held to growing up. And I didn't mean that in a derogatory or judgmental or critical way, but the reality of it was we were raised differently. I was raised in the Pentecostal Holiness Church. He was not. He was raised by his father. I came from my mother, my stepfather, and my grandparents. I was in a two-parent household. And it was, he amazing parents. He had amazing parents. But there was a standard of behavior that was different than what I grew up with. I tell people all the time, I was not a preacher's kid, but I was raised like a preacher's kid. Pentecostal holiness, we was in church every day for something. Them doors of the church were open 7 days a week. And I was okay with that. I loved being in church. I loved learning the Word of God. But it also instilled in me a standard of behavior that I still, in many, 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 many ways, allow to govern how I function today. I'm not someone there's just certain conversations, for example, that I'm not going to have with my parents. I'm not going to behave like I'm not. Like, I get there are folk out here that are totally okay chopping it up with their parents. They cussing and drinking and smoking and doing everything they big and bad enough to do with their parents. No, no, no. No. I am 56 years old. I am not allowed to use slang when I talk to my parents. Their thing is, we paid for all of this education. Ain't, oh, it drives, and sometimes I do it just to be a smarty pants, but ain't, who you talking to? That's where we do that at. No. There's a standard of conduct that I have been held to my entire life. And people don't understand that. So when you look at what that looks like in your relationships, whether it's based on fidelity or how love is being expressed and received or child rearing or all of those things, there's conversations that need to be had that aren't being had, in my professional opinion. They're not being held enough. They're not substantive enough to get to the essence of why folks are functioning the way they are in their relationships. And because the root of this stuff is not being properly addressed, you look more like enemies than you do allies. And what's supposed to be demonstrated love looks more like hate. I hope that addresses the question that you had. So the other point that I wanted to make about actually it's two other points that I wanted to make about unconditional love. And this one's so huge. Goodness gracious, it's so huge. The other person does not try to make you feel small. You want something to rustle Dr. Pitts's feathers and get the hair standing up on the back of my neck? Come into a session with me, talking to your partner sideways. I can't stand it. There's firm boundaries that I put in place in the therapeutic room. If like you want to treat each other like dogs outside of therapy, you do what you do. I have no control over that. But in this therapeutic room, you're going to at least pretend to respect your partner, even if you don't. That belittling, degrading, demeaning, we cannot get you healthy if you insist on engaging in behaviors that are counterproductive to what healthy, fulfilling, and sustainable love looks like, feels like, and should be. We can't do it. Again, if if that's love, what would it look like if you hated your partner? The Your relationship, whether you're married or just committed and dating or living together or whatever it is you're doing, your relationship is supposed to be a safe place. Your relationship is supposed to be a refuge. It is supposed to be a place and space where you can be vulnerable and transparent and not be judged and criticized. Yes, you should be held accountable. Love me enough to tell me the truth. Love me enough to be like, you know what? You need to work on X, Y, and Z, and here's why. And you can communicate that in a non judgmental or critical way. But belittling, degrading, demeaning, gaslight, like I'm so sick of hearing the word gaslighting. How you loving somebody and you gaslighting them all the time? That's verbal abuse. That's emotional abuse. That's not love. It's not. The relationship is reciprocal and not transactional. Woo! I could do a session on this one alone. So oftentimes, people come into relationships and treat them as if they are business transactions. If you do this for me, I'll do that for you. Well, and they're keeping score. But 1 Corinthians 13 tells us that we're not supposed to keep score. We're not supposed to keep tracks of rights and wrongs and all of those things, right? So reciprocity says, I'm going to give you love, respect, adoration, blah, blah, blah. And it ideally is supposed to be reciprocated. Now, as you can imagine, because I deal with other people's problems all day, every day, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, and these grown folk, let me just put that disclaimer out there. We're talking folk that's good and grown. I'm not doing this, that. He don't and she don't. And what are we, 5? So this tit for tat stuff that's going on in relationships is not an appropriate way to demonstrate that you love someone. The tit for tat, blow the relationship up. It's no good. Again, if that's love, what would it look like if you hated your partner? Your relationship is not or should not be a business transaction. If you genuinely and sincerely love a person, you ought to be able to demonstrate that. And here's the thing. Let me just put the hay down where the goats can get it. I say constantly, I don't have a perfect marriage. Who does? Nobody. Hello. But I have a healthy marriage. And part of the reason why it's healthy is because we treat each other the way that we want to be treated. It's not transactional. It's not, oh, well, if you respect me, I'll respect you. Well, if you get me something, I'll get you something. Well, if you fix my plate, no. No. That's not love. That's a business transaction. Any questions so far? One of the things that keeps coming up in both my individual's work and my couple's work are these train wreck conversations about these dating apps. And not going to name any of them in particular because I'm not trying to be sued. But these dating apps are a doozy. And part of the reason why they're a doozy is because They're set up for people to be inauthentic. And how can you demonstrate true, healthy, authentic love for someone if you're not showing up as who you really are? If you're sending your representative and your representative is a gaslighter, your representative is an abuser, your representative is a batterer, your representative is the walking wounded, your representative is mean, hateful, nasty, and just miserable, your representative is blaming everything and everybody in their life for everything that's wrong, and they're not taking responsibility or accountability for the fact that they were the common denominator in those relationships. How can you say, I love you? What does it look like? How are you expressing your love? How can you practice? Well, I'm so glad you asked. How do you want to be treated? Do you want somebody screaming and yelling and hooping, hollering and cussing and fussing at you and calling you everything but a child of God? Do you want somebody judging you and criticizing you and belittling you and degrading you and demeaning you? Do you want somebody lying to you and cheating on you? Don't fall out your chair when I say this. One of the things that I frequently say to, whether I'm doing couples work or individual work, because I'm a human therapist. One of the things that I say to my male clients in particular who have cheating issues is, you know, I've been at this for a long time, and I've been dealing with the opposite sex willingly for 42 years. Since I was 14 was when I had my first so-called little boyfriend. And I will tell you, I have never, ever, anywhere on the globe that I have been, I have never met a boy or a man that can appropriately handle the trash that so many of them dish out. And it's hilarious to me because I'm like, you can't even blink and entertain the thought of your woman being with somebody else, but yet you out here doing everything you big and bad enough to do. And you know what you say? I'm gonna go old school Eddie Murphy. Baby, it don't mean nothing, but I love you. If you dealing with all the community property is how you demonstrate your love to me, what would it look like if you hated me? I, Polyamory is not my thing. And I'm guessing for many of you, it's not your thing either. So you have to ask yourself, is the person that I'm dealing with even operating from the same moral compass that I am? And if they're not, particularly if you're not already married to them, why are you dealing with them? I want to give you some key things, and then I'm going to give you some healthy characteristics that I believe are going to be instrumental in helping you to better understand the healthiness associated with the exchange of love. So, unconditional love is a type of love that exists without bounds. However, to love freely and without condition, you must also love without the expectation of repayment. But as we know in biblical terms, it's reciprocity. And if you put it in carnal context, it's the law of circulation, it's the law of attraction. It's just, we live in a universe that operates off of laws. So you put it out there, if you're putting it out there with the right person, it'll be reciprocated. When you think of unconditional love, you may think of the love a parent has for a child or the romantic love that you see in a movie. This type of love accepts you and doesn't try to change you. It doesn't make you feel small, and it is reciprocated. Unconditional love can be healthy and good for you as long as it has boundaries. Healthy relationships, healthy demonstrations of love must have boundaries. You cannot have a healthy, fulfilling, and sustainable relationship without firm boundaries and the consequences for violating those boundaries. People say all the time, Dr. Pitts, how do you impose a consequence on someone that's grown? I'm the wrong person to ask that because I don't have abandonment or rejection issues anymore, and I am totally okay telling you to kick rocks. So, and that's leaving is not always necessarily the answer, but I will tell you that particularly if you're not married, you got to start doing some inventory. You have to start taking some personal inventory and really doing a better job of assessing who you're allowing to have intimate connection to you, because that intimate connection is playing a part in how you're giving and receiving love. Finding unconditional love, as I said, starts with giving yourself love first. Practicing loving without expectation, along with paying attention to you, will teach you how to express love to others and help you find unconditional love in your life. Practice. You've got to raise your standards. And what I've learned in doing this work all these years is that people are afraid to raise their standards because they're afraid, for some strange reason, with all the billions of people on planet Earth, that they're going to be the one person that grows old and dies with cats. For the life of me. So people settle. You settle for mediocrity. You settle for substandard. You settle for nonsense. And then you wonder why your relationships are trash. Well, old people used to say, you lay down with dogs, you get fleas. The reality of it is that because there's no perfect person, there's not going to be a perfect relationship, as I said earlier, but there are plenty of healthy people walking planet Earth, and all of them aren't married. All of them are in committed relationships. But if you go looking in the trash can for a partner, guess what? You probably going to find one. So why are you surprised when they act like trash? And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful, judgmental, or critical, but let's call a spade a spade. You got some folks out here that's on some craziness. Well, where'd you find them? Why did you ignore the red flags? You didn't know they was crazy. They've been showing you they was crazy since the third date. But you so pressed to not be by yourself. You so pressed to, be able to say you have someone, that you got someone that you sharing with 6 other people. Because women cheat too. I told y'all I used to cheat. Like, don't judge me. I was honest about my junk. So let's look at some characteristics real quick, because I got a consultation I got to do at the top of the hour. So some ways that can give you some insight as to whether or not you're being loved in a healthy way, or if you're demonstrating love in a healthy way. Honesty and accountability. That might seem strange to you that that's a way to demonstrate that you love someone, but if you can't be honest with me, and if I can't hold you accountable for things that maybe you've said or done that didn't sit well with me, how can you say that you love me? How can you say that you love me and continually engage in behavior because you're being dishonest and you won't take accountability? Why should I believe that you love me? Open communication, believe it or not, is a way to demonstrate that you love someone. Loving them enough to tell them the truth in an empathetic and compassionate way. Allowing that two-way street where each of you is emotionally safe enough to be vulnerable and transparent and completely honest with each other about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your identified needs are that are met and unmet. You have to have that conversation. Fairness. Life's not fair, but there is a certain degree of fairness that can exist and should exist in a relationship if you're going to be demonstrating that you love someone in a healthy, positive, and productive way. Sharing responsibilities. You have so many people out here that don't have appropriate conversations about the roles in the relationship, and because they don't have those appropriate conversations, they are in an imbalanced relationship. that is leaving one of the partners feeling dismissed, devalued, insignificant, and whatever the case may be. And when people start to take on those feelings, oh, before time is up, they're going to start to question whether or not you really love them. Because if you really love me, why are you putting all of this responsibility on me and not taking accountability for your contribution to balancing out the relationship? Respect, trust and support, non threatening behavior, intimacy, physical affection, personal integrity, all of those things demonstrated in positive and productive ways are beautiful, beautiful ways to demonstrate that you love the person that you're with. And if you find yourself in the relationships that you've been in, if you keep hearing this broken record recurring theme that suggests that you don't know how to give or receive love, at some point in time, you got to pay attention. Because it's like I said before, you're responsible for modifying your behavior. You're responsible for taking accountability for the ways that you're showing up in the relationship that your partner is conveying to you that hurt. Love me enough to not be the source of my pain. Love me enough that I don't have to be another person that you survive. Love me enough that I don't find myself constantly questioning whether or not staying in this relationship is in my best interest. Love me enough to be a healing agent. Love me enough. Love me enough so that I know that I'm enough. I'm going to finish with this thought. You've heard me talk about anxious, preoccupied, insecure attachment style before. And certainly, if someone is insecure, it is their responsibility to do the necessary self-work to become a stronger, healthier, better version of themselves so that they can give and receive love in a healthy way. However, we each have the ability to fuel the person that we love and care about's insecurities. It's not your job to fix their insecurity, but it is your job to not engage in behavior that exacerbates it. So if you know that you're in a relationship with someone who's insecure and you picked them, why would you then engage in behavior that fuels that insecurity? Relationships are a two-way street. They're not intellectual exercises. They're relational interactions. And you have the ability to be the change that you wish to see in your relationships. You have the ability to demonstrate love in the way that you want to receive it. And if you find yourself in these repeated broken cycles where you're giving to the point of depletion and you're not receiving love the way you want and need and deserve to in a healthy way, it's time to put the brakes on and look in the mirror and ask yourself, why do you keep finding yourself in relationships with people that are either unwilling or incapable of loving you in a healthy way? And you gotta ask yourself, folks, do you love yourself? You gotta be honest. And it's not enough to be like, oh yeah, Dr. Pitts, I love myself. Do your actions demonstrate that though? Because the mouth will say anything. I have people who tell me all the time, "Oh, I'm confident and I got self-esteem the whole 9 yards," and then I've worked with them for 3, 4 weeks, and I'm like, no. We need to revisit this. What is your definition of self-love? What is your definition of self-acceptance? What is your definition of self-esteem? Because all signs point to shattered sense of self. It starts with you. Be the change that you want to see. Learn how to love you. Learn how to love unconditionally. And you wake up each day with it purposed in your heart, mind, spirit, and soul to be a stronger, healthier, better version of yourself than you were the day before. I'll see y'all next week. Bye-bye.